Do you know Hamza Khan
Yeah, I
from
do.
Ryerson? I was in his
Mhm.
social media class and my friend was there and he saw me put in like hang out with like whoever it was at the time and he just told all these people and I just started getting roasted for like 2 months. I'm the guy who schedules in like a hangout or like schedules in like coffee, you know? But I swear if you don't do that, like I just like forget and then people hate me. So I'm like, I'd rather
Mhm.
get made fun of than like double booking and then I'm that guy who's like Mo's over here 2 years ago. Never shows up.
Never shows up or forgets. Like, oh, we planned to meet. Oh, that was last week. No, I
Mm.
forgot now. So I definitely need to get better with the Google Calendar.
It's the way to
Yeah,
be,
for
for
sure.
sure.
But what doesn't make sense, Victoria, is that you use Google Calendar, but then you made an Apple Calendar invite.
Did I make an Apple
Yeah.
calendar invite?
I was like, man, she schedules like crazy. 2 apps.
I don't even have Apple, so it must have randomly gone there somehow.
All right. Well, Victoria, welcome to the show. Can you just start off by saying like what are you doing with Decker Creative Strategy and everything you plan to do in the future?
Essentially, Decker is a business model for my creative freedom. So I accidentally fell into freelancing, and that freelancing started being continuous. So I realized, okay, so let's make this into a business. But really, what I wanted to do is allow myself to have, a couple days a week where I could just create stuff for the internet because that's what I love doing. And so I found a way to make my freelancing essentially sustain the rest of my week where I just create stuff for the internet. Um, and that's essentially what it is to me. What it is to other people is a very resourceful yet holistic sort of approach to the creative agency. So a lot of small businesses aren't really at the point where they're looking for um, a full-on creative agency, but then also they don't want to hire a freelancer because a freelancer isn't as holistic as they need. Like they don't know. Typically, when you go to a freelancer, you need to know, okay, I want like a corporate video or I want a social media um, content batch bundle. They don't really know what to ask for necessarily, and so I sort of filled that gap of bridging those two things. And a lot of it comes from the philosophy of, you no longer need a Super Bowl ad to make a splash. Like there are people building network television size audiences from their smartphones. So kind of building on that concept of really accessible, holistic DIY marketing strategies. And that's essentially what it's become.
So I want to just talk quickly. You had a tweet that went pretty viral the other day about a meme, but I was much more interested in the follow up that you had. And one quote stuck out to me, and it said, "In 2020, you win the internet with a strong early engagement rate." Can you walk people kind of through what that means to you?
Yeah. It's essentially, there's a lot of KPIs that businesses look at when it comes to social media. And I was trying to think, okay, so how do you like block all that clutter of all these different numbers that you think about? And what is the one that actually is the most important to determining your success? And I came to the realization that it really is the early engagement rate, because in social media, there's essentially two things you need to be successful. You need to attract the humans and you need to attract the robots. And how do you tell a robot that a piece of content is good? How does this like algorithm thing identify a piece of content and be like, okay, all these other people are going to like it? What is the data that they're looking at? And the early engagement rate showed up for me as being the most important. And it does make a lot of sense. It's just, if more people engage with this piece of content than normally engage from content from this account, then therefore it must have something enticing about it. And so that tells a robot that your content is good. And I think on a philosophical front, it's interesting to think about how, like we think about what jobs aren't going to be replaced by AI and things like that. And we think art, but then I've also seen some like robot Twitter accounts creating content that is actually quite emotionally powerful. So I don't know, on that front of like what is and isn't going to be replaced, the fact that a robot can identify what is good content and by extension what is good art, I think is just kind of interesting. I don't know if that was like a weird tangent that you didn't want me to go
No,
down.
no, 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 no. That was great. That was great. One of the most interesting things I think about when I use these social platforms and I think about it as a marketer is that like our data and our behavior is essentially the product. And what this whole past 10 years, let's call it, on Instagram and Facebook has really been about training these algorithms to understand what engages and what works best for us. So like for me, it does make a lot of sense that early engagement rate, whether you do that with a carousel, whether you do that with a reel or a tweet, like that early first hour, if you look at kind of where that value is coming from, Instagram's going to show that to more people if they see that a bunch of people have engaged with it already. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to creative people sometimes, because I think, and me and Will have talked about this a bunch, like the trap that a lot of people get stuck in is that the agency or the creative team wants to make something memorable, or they want to make something super creative. But something that we've noticed recently is that, UGC, or shaky video as we like to call it, actually performs better sometimes than the super high-end produced creative stuff. So as somebody who's kind of in the freelance agency world, how do you square away this idea that, you go to school for media, you have some creative chops, you have design chops, but this UGC stuff is performing better sometimes? Like, how do you square those two things away?
That's a really interesting question, because it's kind of what motivated me to want to create this creative agency. So I went through 5 years of media school, as we previously discussed, and I always had sort of this inferiority complex, I guess, because everyone around me was more creative, and there's like, when you're in a media production program, there's always somebody who's going to be a better designer than you, or a better audio person, or a better creative director. And I just constantly felt like I wasn't the best at anything, and therefore I must be awful. I just must not have a future here. But what I found is that I'm very good at being rather good at strategy and business, and also rather good at design, or good enough at design, and then also a pretty good writer. So I was a bit of a Swiss Army knife with marketing. And so that's sort of what motivated me to dive into this is sort of what I mentioned before about how like people are creating massive audiences from their smartphones. It's no longer this like elitist idea of you need to have even a media production degree necessarily to go viral. First of all, going viral isn't a strategy, but you don't need this high-end sort of look to your content. And actually it can work against you, because we've been so conditioned to look at high production value as an advertisement. So if you're scrolling across TikTok and it's clearly smartphone content, and then, oh, boom, studio content, you often, even if it's not actually studio content, even if it's just another TikTok that happened to be higher quality, you might actually think it's an ad. So the key to winning in vertical video formats is making your content look like it is user generated, I think.
So if I were to bring it back just a little bit, you were talking about, early engagement is the key to victory, to like get the robot algorithm to spin your content through a lot of people. What are some like strategies to create content that encourages that engagement? Is it the content and the art itself, or is it a call to action in the description? If I were to give one example before you give your take, like look at Gary Vee, he had like the minute club or something, where it's like the first minute of a post, like if you comment, I was here, like 60-second club or hashtag 60-second club, he would like pick 3 of those people and like FaceTime them. So there's like incentive to like engage with his posts and like build up this, early engagement like culture with his content. So like are your ideas similar to that, or like do you have something different?
My approach to call to action specifically is that if your content is interesting and people like it, that they'll make up their own call to action. They'll go to your profile, they'll check you out. On my This is Decker Instagram account, like there's no call to action on any single post. It's strictly just, here are my thoughts, here's a how to, here's a whatever. And my Twitter and my LinkedIn posts tend to be the same as well. And I have a steady stream of clients just from that, because I think they recognize, okay, I have a need as a business owner. She clearly knows what she's talking about. I'll reach out. So I never have to put at the bottom of my thing, reach out if you want a consultation with me. I think good content is the call to action. And what was the first part of that question? I think I had something.
What were your strategies? So that's you're talking about what you've done for yourself, but when you have a new client, they need content that's hot, that's going to grab engagement, spin their content through the algorithm to a lot of people. I mean, don't reveal all your secrets, but like, what are you doing for them to, help them get that early engagement?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to reveal all my secrets. Actually, inspired also by Gary Vee. I think it was, yeah, he's
Yeah,
the one who said, um,
he spills
he's
all
what
the beans.
he
I
does,
watch
but
his
yet
stuff.
he
I'm
has a
like, mother.
massive, yet he has, I imagine, I assume, a steady flow of clients. And how he put it is, and I've said this because some of my clients are sort of public figures, so they're often the business that they're attracting is speaking engagements, and they'll often say things like, why would I put my best stuff online? Then people won't book me as a speaker. But people are booking you as a speaker. Like, there's no information that you as a public speaker could possibly share during your speech that isn't available on Google. That's the reality. So as a public speaker, I think the best marketing strategy for you is building up your public profile, because then it's the access that you're selling. And that's what Gary Vee essentially said, is that when you hire him, you're not hiring his tangible knowledge, because he puts that all out online. What you're buying is the access to him, the one-on-one interaction. So for both my clients and myself, I definitely suggest putting your best stuff out there. It's also, I worked for a film studio years ago, and I started to notice that in the commercials, they were putting all the best scenes and all the best moments from the film in the trailer. And I started wondering why they would be doing that. And my hypothesis is that they figured that if you save all the best stuff for the actual film, people don't go. The reality is people just don't go see the film. If you save it, if you put it in the trailer, people go, they get what they expected, and maybe they get a little extra more. But the choice isn't, will they go see the film and love it, or will they go see the film and just get what they expected? The choice is they don't go to see the film, or they get what they expected. It's a different choice, I think, in the mind. So what I suggest to clients also is, essentially, you want your social media to evoke the same feeling that your product does. And so the example I often give is, you could literally be selling Swiss Army knives, which is a very helpful product. But if your social media itself isn't helpful, then you're not going to build that community. You're essentially just continuing to advertise, and advertising is just renting space on a random platform. So if you're, Swiss Army knife, then you're going to want to be helpful. I work for a toy company, so you want it to be playful and joyful, and you want to bring joy through the actual individual posts, not just buy this toy to get the joy. It's, here's some joy. You want more? You go buy the product.
Absolutely. I think everything that you just said there is very, very straightforward and logical, and it makes sense in theory. But we've been doing content marketing for brands and for ourselves for a couple of years now, and it's very different in practice. I mean, content, it's hard to make. It takes time. It takes emotional labor. I was wondering, where are some of the biggest struggles that you see in content marketing, and kind of what are some of the things that brands aren't thinking about and thinking about content marketing the wrong way?
There's definitely a fear of building in public, understanding that the first couple posts might not be fantastic. A lot of people want to have this like clean, amazing launch, and some people are capable of that. But I think, like, I work with small businesses, and it's very, very different from working with larger companies that have the ability to have this year-long strategy planned out in advance. So I think accepting that iterative process, and even for me, I actually launched This Is Decker with an entirely different aesthetic, and then deleted all the posts and then restarted with the one that I have now. And it's fine, because maybe if I hadn't actually just started posting that original set of content, I would have just allowed this to be yet another idea that stays in my head and never actually beginning. So even if you start on the maybe not perfect foot, it's better that you start.
Yeah, that reminds us of our content journey, trying to advertise the pod. We started with a lot of, like clips from the show. We had like this like branded like what was it called, like overlay for our Instagram IGTVs, and it did well at first, but then we started seeing like views starting to drop, and like we would always have like weekly meetings to like figure out how we can rebrand the content. And it was just like, honestly, just putting it out, seeing what people like, and just read and adjust. And that's just the name of the game when it comes to content. I don't think you can't over intellectualize everything like you're saying. And Mose, you can speak on this with our friend who we're working with. He has like a video game company. It's a bit of a slog to get him out of his head to get content out to advertise what he's doing. So like, do you have any tips or tricks for us to like get someone out of their head, out of the clouds, and onto the ground, and like marching towards, something practical for their to grow their business?
It's a tough question because I think it's one that my clients also struggle with, and frankly, I don't have a succinct answer to say, other than to share my personal experience of like what I mentioned about This Is Decker and how it was iterative for me as well. And I think the point of a content marketing strategy is two main services essentially I provide is one, the evergreen core foundation, which is like your brand narrative of who you are, your founding story, and your positioning. But then there's the content marketing strategy. And the point of the content marketing strategy is to evolve with culture. So even if you do go into it without the iterative mindset, you're going to end up evolving anyways, because the whole point of content is that you move with culture, you move with current events. And so it's a content marketing strategy that doesn't evolve isn't really a content marketing strategy. That's your evergreen positioning. That's your evergreen narrative. So I would probably suggest making that distinction to the client and seeing if that kind of helps them frame evergreen versus pulsed. And I'm actually curious, if you don't mind me flipping it on to you guys, but what I mentioned about how some public figures are hesitant to put their best content out there because it won't attract, paid speaking gigs. You guys put really good content on your Instagram that almost gives away the highlights of your podcast right in your Instagram. Was that ever a conversation for you about, should we keep it more of a teaser based on the Instagram so that they go to the podcast, or were you happy to build up that audience?
Yeah, I think at a high level, I think advertising and content marketing from digital to, if we kind of look back 20 years with television, I don't think the marketing itself has changed a whole lot. I think what has changed is the context, right? Like if you look on digital, people go to digital to connect, they go to be entertained, they go to be inspired. And so it's not like this very linear thing where they're sitting down and they're watching a television show for 30 minutes. And kind of one of the benefits that you saw with commercials there is that when a commercial was on, like the consumer had the choice, like they could go to the washroom, they could go do other things, they could not listen to the commercial, but the commercial commanded that space, right? There was nothing else going on. And so we've kind of taken that best practice, I think, in a lot of times and just applied it to social. I don't think that works very well. In terms of giving away our best content on our social media and this highlight approach and doing carousels, I think what we realized very early on was that if you think about the decision that you make when you go down to sit and listen to a podcast, right, it's a very active decision. I kind of think about that as like a lean in, whereas a lot of times on social, like Instagram and Facebook, I like to call it the default. If you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes, a lot of that time is just ended up scrolling. Like you doom scroll. It's kind of the default. I think of it as like water rising in a pot, right? That content's just going to find you. Mm-hmm. So our thought was that like that active choice to go and listen to a podcast, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour, like it's kind of a tough choice for a lot of people. So instead of kind of making a trade-off, I think that we see Instagram really as a complement to the podcast, and that if we can on-ramp people with our best content and kind of get them interested, then that's just a win for us, because it's going to increase the chance that those people convert into actual listeners. And if we're thinking down the road and we kind of build the podcast up and we have a following, ultimately, like we're going to make our dollars, or we're going to monetize with ads or with products. And the best way that we can do that is kind of expanding the funnel at the top end and bringing tons of awareness. So even more recently, like beyond making really good content, one of the things that me and Will have been talking to about a bunch is that I think a lot of times we get caught in this content trap where it's like, if we want to grow this account, if we want to grow this following, we need to create better content, we need to create more content. But what we've been thinking about a lot is connections, right? If we can go to a design account or a video account that has 50,000 followers or 200,000 followers, and we say, you know what, we love the stuff that you're doing. Is there any chance we could do a guest post, or could we pay for a post? Really, I think the game right now is not so much content. Content's important. I think content's kind of the table stakes. If you make good content, right, you're going to get people engaged. But one of the more important things, I think, and one of the levers that people aren't pulling is like, look at your community, look at the people that you're going to serve. If those people are into design, like there's a really good chance that they're going to follow other design accounts. And if you can kind of create this ambient awareness that we're not only on our account, but we're going to go collaborate and we're going to try to go and be other places, I think that's just one of the levers that nobody's really thinking about. And it goes back to this idea, right? People go on social media to connect. We're not there because we want to be advertised. Although Facebook might say their goal is that we want to connect users to users. They're an advertising business, same with Instagram. So if you can kind of align yourself, like you were saying, with the platform, like the platform's in business to keep people on the platform. So if you have a carousel that's 10 slides and you get somebody to swipe all the way through, like you're really going to hack that engagement rate, because to the robots and to the algorithm, they're going to say, oh, people are engaged with this post. And then from there, it's about really building community and trying to connect with partners in your space. And that kind of goes back to thinking about the people that you serve.
For sure. I love that. The aspect of collaboration and guest posts, for sure. I definitely see massive value. And are you ever, well, it depends how much of your business model is based on client work. But for me, something that I'm trying to be very conscious of is not just embedding myself into the marketing community and the media community, because something that I'm really trying to focus on is those businesses who don't think that a creative strategy is for them. For example, I just worked with a boutique accounting firm, and they came just looking for their pitch deck to look a little bit nicer. And then through our conversations, we started building out a full-on narrative for why a client should seek out their services versus one of the big, massive 5 or whatever in the city. So we started building out a narrative and a beautiful website and sort of a brand for them. And when they initially came to me, they never thought that they would be one of those industries that would need sort of an aesthetic or a story with them. And so what I'm trying to say with that is I'm trying to be conscious of how I make sure that I don't sort of market to other marketers. And that's something that I'm toying with, but I'm not sure if that for you is necessarily the right approach, because is your key sort of stakeholder the marketing industry and the media industry, sort of that thought leadership aspect?
Honestly, it's something for us that's evolving. There is that aspect that like we are marketers. I think if we take if we kind of zoom out a step further, I think everyone's a media company, as cliche as that is. Like the table stakes is content, because the barrier to entry is so low, anyone can participate. And so number one, that means consistency is really important. So whether you're a bank or you're in finance or you are in e-commerce, if you're selling something, like to me, it really doesn't matter, because everyone can have a voice. So it's like, if you're not using that opportunity, you're kind of leaving something on the table. And then the other thing that's really interesting to me is that these banks and like what I always struggle with clients, or when I'm talking to Will or kind of anyone external, is that like because everyone's connected online, like if you're a bank, you're not just competing with the other bank for attention, right? Like you're competing with everyone else. So the really hard part, I think, is that you kind of have to reframe and be like, if we are a bank, like what are the adjacent areas within our business that we can provide value to customers that aren't necessarily directly about trying to sell them something? So maybe it's like the bank putting out a personal finance plan for university students, because like, if we're being honest, those are skills that aren't being taught in high school. It's not common knowledge. So like, I just look at things adjacent to businesses a lot of the time as opportunities that people don't think about for the most part, and that are super high leverage, because like there's opportunity there. And whether you're a bank or you're in e-commerce, just like content is the table stakes. So you might as well mine for those areas that are, number one, low competition, and number two, are super high leverage. And that if I'm a consumer, even if I'm not thinking, oh, I want to do business with this bank, I'm going to take value away from that post anyways.
So that reminds me, when you're saying about the banks, like how can they, provide other value like adjacent to their business? I look at the LCBO. I don't know if you guys remember those ads they were doing where like they had this like one dude, he's like, hey, my name's James, whatever it was. And he like teaches you how to make a drink with one of like the liquors at the LCBO. And it reminds me of when Mose would always tell me like a lot of these big media companies are like talent agencies before content like creators. So you look at Nelk Boys, they're like hiring on, like they bring on all these guys that weren't with them before, and they like are just like talent. They're signed in Elk Boys, or you look at Barstool, they're always hiring new podcasts or people. So we're kind of looking at the media industry changing to marketing that's putting like talent first. So you're buying the product because this person is like cool and you like relate with them. How much of the conversations that you have with your clients, I know it's like a bit smaller scale than let's say a Nook Boys or Barstool, how much of your conversation is let's get you to be the talent business owner, or like one of your employees be the talent, or we hire someone? Like how much are you trying to tell a story through the people in your business, in your clients' businesses?
That's a great question, because part of being a small business is typically they're founder driven. So they're sole proprietorship. So I always have a conversation with every new client of how much do you want to be the face of this company? Because some people, they don't like, one client actually, they hadn't quit their full-time job yet. So they actually didn't want their face on their business at all. And they didn't want their employer to know. And the others that their brand, well, with public figures, for example, it's literally their personal brand that is their business brand. Huge. So I always have a conversation with them about how much they're willing to put themselves out in front. And I always, if there's a way to sort of convince them to be willing to do that, I do encourage that for sure. The storytelling from that aspect is so powerful, especially when you're a small business and you want to be in, small business gift guides. And if you want to get featured in, like, the amount of publicity that you can get from being a small business founder right now, when everyone's looking to support small businesses, is massive. So I definitely encourage that. And then I also have conversations about how to like divide your personal account and your professional and your business account. Like which account do you post your behind the scenes on, and which account do you post your sort of more vulnerable storytelling on? And typically the answer is you cross promote the channels. TikTok, I'm still deciding what I find is best, a personal, like, for example, Victoria Morton doing whatever versus Decker doing something on TikTok. I'm still playing with that, but yeah, I definitely put the founder up front whenever I can.
Well, how do you convince, I'm trying to think, like, how do you convince a person, like, it's important to put your face in front of everything? Because, I mean, I think there's like undebatably the truth that if you can put a person towards a brand, or align a person with a brand who's like likable, obviously, it's going to be more successful than if it's just a logo or a shield or whatever is front facing. So like, is there numbers we can show? Like, what is it that we can actually show these people? Because I deal with this too with certain clients. I'm like, we got to do people first, not product first.
I mean, I don't have a data-driven argument at this point, other than, I don't have a data-driven argument. I would say that those that are looking to put their face out front typically will almost let you know at the beginning that that's what they're looking for. I've also had some difficult situations where maybe a co-founder or an early hire is a really good speaker and the original founder might not be, and having that conversation about maybe we start to put them a little bit more in front. Yeah, I mean, other than to just say that, I mean, obviously they're reaching out to you for a reason, and you can kind of always cite back to those reasons that, like, you're not currently getting the engagement that you want, so how about we try this? And that's kind of my fallback is, let me put this on airplane mode. Yeah, my fallback is always like, well, what brought you to me? And then I always reference back those reasons whenever I come into a sticky situation where I have to convince a client to try something.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears really quickly here. You had a great hot take about the Instagram's latest product rollout. And you said that I genuinely want to know what user testing was done by IG's product team before these recent rollouts. I think you are in the camp with so many other people that are thinking, like, what's going on here? Like, I think one of the challenges that Instagram and any of these big apps are going to deal with is that you have this behavior set that consumers are so used to. And so even something as small as changing a button or where you see notifications or how you find people on Instagram, it's going to create this huge ripple effect. But I also look at it from the perspective of Instagram and Facebook and their advertising businesses, and they need to make money. And TikTok is kind of this existential threat to their advertising business. As a consumer, like, Is this update something that'll completely deter you from using the platform, or what do you think some of the biggest challenges they're going to have to navigate with changing platform, with kind of prioritizing Reels or prioritizing Instagram shopping? Like, how do you see this playing out? Is it something that's a massive deal for you? Is it something that's kind of like, well, this is a minor inconvenience, but I think we'll all get to kind of used to it in 2 or 3 weeks? How do you see product updates for these major tech platforms playing out?
I'm genuinely fascinated for how this is going to go, because it's so hard to ever picture Instagram falling. It's for many years now, it's been like, as TikToks come and go, or TikToks come, or Vine came and went, and different platforms, Instagram's sort of been that core, like that, and YouTube being like those fallback platforms. So it's hard to imagine it ever falling, but it certainly kind of feels like, between the upset around this change paired with the fact that it's such a visual platform and people's lives aren't as visual right now as they have been before. Nobody's posting their vacations, nobody's posting their events they're going to. It's a lot of photos of coffee on a table and notebooks, and it's a lot of,
or your Zoom setup.
Yes, yeah, it's and how many times can we post that? So like, that's the biggest thing working against Instagram right now, is the fact that people don't have lives to show off right now. And so that, paired with the fact that they're not happy about this update, I mean, bigger companies have fallen. So it's not unreasonable to think that. At the same time, I'm not happy with the user experience of where they placed it, but in terms of the shopping experience of, I was scrolling through it, and it's actually a much more aesthetically pleasing shopping experience than almost any e-commerce website that I've been on. So, I mean, had they just implemented it a bit better, I think that it could have been a lot more successful, and maybe it still will be successful. I'm not sure.
See, I wonder why they put the shopping like right where like the heart was to see activity. Like I just wonder, maybe they were seeing an uptick like recently of like people buying a lot through Instagram. Maybe Instagram gets a cut. They want to incentivize that more. I just wonder, like, is there like a resource somewhere I can read this? Like, I just want to find out why they made this decision.
I also want to know. I mean, my assumption is they put it there because that's where most people click on out of habit. And so your thumb automatically kind of goes there. And I think one of the problems with rolling out Reels is that they didn't embed it into one of our existing behaviors. Like the place where you had to go to create a Reel wasn't already instinctually there, whereas putting the shop button in the place of somewhere we were used to going, I think probably helped a lot. Or is probably their take there. In terms of why they did this, there has been a platform for a while called Like to Know It, where influencers would sign up for this program called Like to Know It, and you could tag the products that you're wearing, and it would link you to a different website, and that website would then email you at the end of the week all the products that you liked to know, which is a very weird way of getting the store that an influencer bought their shirt from, but it was the only way at the time for an influencer to show a brand that they're actually converting sales. And so it made sense for a long time that shop was going to come. People have been using Instagram for so long to promote products, it made sense that they would just embed a sales channel right in there. But again, they just rolled it out very bizarrely.
My thing here is, I think that Instagram is going to be like, if I look at this kind of at a high level, right? I think a lot of the innovation within the tech landscape, if I look at the kind of biggest players, is actually happening in the East. It's not happening in the West. And so TikTok's parent company ByteDance also has a similar platform in China, and they've really run away with, I guess they call it social commerce. It's really just driving people to purchase in-app. If you think about YouTube, one of the biggest regrets that YouTube's going to have, if they look back on their history, is that people don't transact on their platform, right? Like the Nelk Boys was an example that Will brought up earlier. James Charles, David Dobrik, Logan Paul, like all these massive influencers have merch brands, but people buy their merch off platform, and YouTube has lost all that value. So for Instagram, right, they want to become the shopping mall online. And the best way to do that is with video. That's what Tencent's figured out. That's why Instagram cares so much about TikTok, right? The race really right now is whether TikTok gets banned or stays in the West. And then secondly, like who figures out social commerce, sorry, first, Instagram or TikTok? And if I had to bet, honestly, like, because TikTok is the better video platform, right? If you think about YouTube is really made for the desktop. Even if you go on the app today, me and Will have talked about this before, that video takes up about a third of your screen. Whereas if you go on TikTok, it's a full screen experience. So for Instagram, they need to make Reels work because they're not a video, they're a visual platform, but most of that visual is done with photos or with stories. Stories have been their best performing ad unit for a couple of years now. I think 60% of time spent on Instagram is actually on stories. So Instagram's push really right now is like, how do we convert all of this attention that we're capturing with ad dollars, right? If people are spending 60% of their time on the platform, the way that Instagram has monetized that has been through ads, particularly with stories. So their push really right now is that they want to convert all that attention and their huge billion user audience on the platform into purchasing on the platform. What I have always thought is going to be the biggest friction point here is that like I haven't bought anything on Instagram. I'm curious whether you two have bought anything on Instagram, but my perception has always been that if I'm going to buy something on Instagram, like I always worry about the quality. Is that something that you guys like? I just think that the perception right now is the quality's not there with the product, and I don't want to be taking a chance if I'm going to be spending like 60 or 100, whatever I spend on it. If the product's not worth it, or if I perceive that it's cheap, I'm just not going to make that purchase, no matter like how good the video or the content is behind it.
Well, are you saying getting an ad that says go to our website to buy it, or are you talking about when you like tap the picture and like little nodes pop up saying like this shirt was $100? Like, what are you talking about?
I like you could so however that product journey plays out, whether it's like the influencer, you tap on their picture and then you have all these buy links, or you're getting directed straight from a story ad to the product. I just think that when I arrive at the product page, I think the UI is great. I think if I think about e-commerce sites on the web, like some of the problems I see, like low page loads time. I don't think that a lot of these brands have optimized their e-commerce stores for mobile, as crazy that is to say. So the UI itself, I think it's best in class. I just think that when I get to the product page, there's always that worry in the back of my head, like this product is not going to turn, like I am going to spend money on this product that looks great with the product photography. Everything looks fantastic. And it's going to show up and it's going to be like, I purchased this and it's this like $5 t-shirt, Gildan t-shirt that anyone could like mass produce from China or something like that. That's always been my worry when you're shopping online. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
I don't know about you, Will, but definitely for me, I actually don't really shop ever on mobile. I always like to have it on the desktop where I can like look at the different pages, have the different tabs open. So for me, mobile, I haven't adopted that as a habit. One thing I will mention on the credibility front is interesting is Pinterest. A problem that they've had for years is that a lot of their ads come off as like it's the diet pills and it's the get 1,000 Instagram followers in a week. It's like the really untrustworthy sort of a vibe to it. And I think they've been trying to clean that up. And so a big thing with Instagram, I think will be monitoring to ensure a certain level of quality control. And I think that they're naturally doing that by having been a content platform for so long and now migrating into a sort of, as you said it, what is it, catalog app or the shopping?
The online mall.
Yes.
That's the best way that I've thought about it.
And I think that's probably attributed to the fact that when you follow someone on Instagram, you're following them as an individual, as we kind of spoke about, whereas Pinterest, you don't really follow people for people. You follow kind of aspirationally photos. You don't really care if the photos that people are posting are actually theirs. It's all aspirational. And so it sort of allows for a lack of credibility. And so I think that platform's really struggled to bring in the ad revenue that Instagram has. But I think Instagram's going to do much better with that.
Absolutely. So they've prioritized Reels, they've prioritized shopping. And as a content creator, if I look at kind of the compliments and kind of what Instagram cares about, Will has found amazing success recently posting these 5 to 10 second reels. Instagram's prioritizing them. There's so much organic reach that's being pushed into them. If you are talking to a small business, if you're talking to one of your clients, are you thinking about platforms incentives a lot, and like short content we've just found, whether it's the carousels or the reels, it's just crushing on Instagram. And going back to kind of the original conversation that we started with, right? Will could spend an hour or 2 hours on this really tightly produced 1-minute video that looks beautiful, that has like every part of his craft and all this time and thought into it. And it might get 1,000 views. And then he could also spend 30 minutes to an hour on these reels. And Will can speak to this before you jump in, but like these things have been crushing for him. They're doing like 2,000 to 3,000 views, and he's not spending a whole lot of time there compared to kind of the longer produced stuff. Is this a problem that you see for agencies and for freelancers, that like, I think technology is evolving very fast. I think that if you're not paying attention to what the platform cares about, you're kind of in a losing race. And you're really seeing this kind of quality flip where it's not so much about what the creative can do for you or how good the work is inherently. You're really seeing that most of the work that we're shipping or that we're doing for clients is being shaped by the platform yourself. So is that something that's top of mind for you?
I'm curious, like you asked me earlier about, user generated content, and, or as you called it, the shaky cam.
Shaky video, yeah.
Shaky video. I get that it can be really probably very frustrating as professional content creators, that's often the stuff that does well. But I think that we as content creators sort of have to shake that off and accept that people don't care as much about the quality as they do the connection. And often that's something I'm starting to experiment with. Like I'm actually thinking of challenging myself to make a TikTok every day for the rest of the year, knowing that I'm really bad at making them, but by the end of the year, maybe I won't be. I don't think that there's a correlation anymore between the amount of time you spend on a piece of content. Like that the tweet that I had that blew up.
Three memes, 3 pictures, and it made a story.
Yeah.
And how much time did you spend on that? Like
literally, I was
5 minutes,
class,
10 minutes?
Yeah. I was in class, like saving the memes, and I was like, this would be funny. And then I just posted it and tagged one fan account. And that's actually a really big thing, is for brands, if you want to connect with a creator's audience, but maybe you don't have the money for that creator, or maybe you just want to get the most out of that platform or out of that partnership, partner and connect with the fan groups directly on the fan accounts. They're way cheaper.
I haven't thought about this. This is genius though. Cause I always I love David Dobrik, and YouTube recommends me like 5 to 10 fan accounts that just chop up the best pieces of his content. And these fan accounts, kind of to your point, like they're not making, like David Dobrik makes his own content. He's the one putting all the time and effort in, but they have almost taken what he's doing, the content, and they like some of these accounts have like 100,000 followers on YouTube, which is crazy to me. So you've unlocked something for me. We're getting free work from you almost.
Yes, but like absolutely. I'm happy to give all the ideas away. I always have a fan first approach to everything I do. And I think fan groups are just a fascinating thing as a whole. Like the amount that the skills and I guess the life skills that you learn from being a fan and the ways that you can apply it in the rest of your life is really fascinating. Like to be a fan, you need to be imaginative, you need to be a community engager, you need to be like the organization skills of some of these fan groups to like mobilize around like an artist's release date is like just mind-blowing at this point. Like what K-pop stands did this summer is nothing short of incredible. So tap into the fan groups. They have thousands and thousands of followers for sure. They can't officially usually monetize their content because it's all copyright, but
there's so much organic reach behind them. We're talking about thousands and thousands of fans, and their networks too. Like it's not just one fan account that captures all the value, right? Like there's 10 to 20 different fan accounts, which is super interesting. To wrap up here, me and Will want to put you on the hot seat a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we were wondering if you're a creative strategist, you're into content, our interests are very aligned with, we just do similar things. If you look at our Instagram, what feedback would you give us immediately? Kind of what would you change? What do you think that we're doing well?
First of all, I love it. I love that you're doing the Gary Vee sort of content model, I think, where it's the inverse triangle, because I noticed like the Sarah Jenkins episode, which by the way, bless that girl, I love her. you did the one, I assume, interview with her, but you've made it into content bites and you've spread it out in between. So it's not
For
like
weeks.
5.
We interviewed her like 3 weeks ago and we still have content from her, which is insane.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I love that. And that's exactly what I tell all my clients to do. And you need to sort of get into that macro, micro sort of pipeline. Otherwise you will go nuts. Being able to create like 5 pieces of content out of one big piece of content is how you sort of keep your sanity when you're, a small team. I mentioned I love the aesthetic of the rippled sort of, the rippled sort of design look. I like that you give the value immediately in the post. I don't have to necessarily listen to the podcast. But in terms of like feedback,
what would you change? What do you hate? If you had to say one thing that you hated about our content,
or if you don't hate anything, what are some questions we need to ask ourselves when we're like meeting every week, thinking how do we grow, how do we get bigger? Because obviously the goal is to gain an audience. How should we be moving every day to grow?
I noticed that you've moved into more carousels than previously what appeared to be like the short videos. Have you noticed that how engagement's gotten better since doing that?
Engagement's gotten a lot better on those. The only problem that we have with those is that like it takes about 30 minutes to an hour to create one of those. Whereas like if we're just grabbing a clip from the podcast, or we're grabbing somebody else's content, that could take less than 10 minutes sometimes.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I do love that you moved to the carousel aspect. I love that you're also doing the screenshots or edits of tweets. That's one of my favorite. Like, I don't know what to post someone else's Twitter like, thoughts. Man, I actually like I was so stoked when you guys reached out because I loved what you guys were doing. I noticed you're also putting now in content that's not necessarily edited, or it is edited. But it's not like within the same style as the previous ones. I think it helps add an impromptu vibe, but I'm almost wondering if that should maybe stay on stories and as a highlight. I think,
are you talking about the reposting of other people's videos?
Yeah, are they reposts? Is that
it's their reposts.
The TikTok.
Yeah, the thought behind that is, well, the TikTok one was like a teaser for like our next guest. He was on last week. That's his TikTok. And then the other content, we're like, we also want to, like Moses talked about this, like content curation is something people really like. Like we follow a podcast about hockey and I don't just follow their Instagram for like their Instagram clips. I also follow it for like all the old pictures they post from like legends or like news in hockey. Like there's something about their content curation that draws me to their page beyond their podcast. Even though it's a podcast page, they're still like almost like a news page for hockey. So we're like, we want to provide value with our carousels, but simultaneously be a hub where people can see cool content that we think is great. We tag the people who make it. And it just also creates an extra reach. Those people we tag who make it, like they like our video and they can see if they like us. And maybe that creates more growth.
And the other thing is that like we were like sharing this content anyways. Like if I find a video that I think is awesome or a design that I think is awesome, like Will or somebody else is going to be the first person I send it to. But that activity was just like happening in the DM where no one else could see it. So we're like, if we are like talking about these things anyways, like there is no downside for us. Like please be smart about tagging the people, credit them properly. Don't take credit for work that's not yours. But like if we can push that content to our audience and kind of like add analysis on top, like, oh, they did this transition really well, or like the way that they framed this story was amazing. You should kind of take this, and this away from it. I think that's a win for everyone. So more than just like curating other people's content, I think we're trying to be smarter about not just us growing on Instagram or the podcast, but really like what kind of value can we provide for our audience? And if like that's happening in the DM where no one can see it, then like let's move that away from the DM and like let's put that in. Like to your point about building in public, I just think people are really attracted to a story that they can kind of see and develop in real time. And it's like everyone, or like at least where I'm from, everyone had an artist in high school where they started listening. I think Logic was, we have a good buddy named Max, and Logic was kind of that artist that he listened to like 4 years before everyone. And he had that relationship that's just so much more special. I think we're trying to do the same thing with our own audience. And that's kind of one of the manifestations of that.
I love that. I would say it affects the otherwise really, really strong aesthetic. And I know that we're kind of moving past the need for like an aggressively tailored aesthetic on Instagram, but I still do think of the Instagram layout as being sort of your homepage to the website. so it's almost like if you took those insights and then gave them the same, like the one of Moose, took those insights and gave the same treatment as you did for like Virgil Abloh, maybe. But otherwise, I love it. Like I honestly think you guys are doing fantastic, and I'm so excited to see how long have you guys been doing this for?
About 4 months, 4.5 or something.
That's incredible.
We're going to be
Very
running
recently.
our first paid ad this week. It's already in review, and then doing like some guest posts. But we're just trying to like experiment, test the waters. You know, just try and figure out how to get views, because I think Moses is doing all the carousels. I'm terrible at this design stuff. I do the video editing, all stuff, but like he's killing it. I read this content that he's making, and I also read other guys' content who have like 100,000, 50,000, 20,000 followers, and I'm thinking like, Mose, like this is like on their level, if not better, or sometimes a bit worse, but it's like their level. But we have 76 followers. It's not getting that much reach. We just need to get some like exposure. So besides like ads, and I don't want to keep you on too long. I know it's been like an hour of your time, but what do you think is a good way to get more exposure outside of like a paid ad, outside of a guest post? Like, is there another strategy that we can apply?
Yeah, well, I would say Instagram is like the worst platform for going viral. How are you guys on Twitter? And I hate to say this, but I think you know it's coming. TikTok, are you on there?
No, TikTok, it's one of those things where it's like we've talked about, like I was listening to a podcast with Gary Vee with Eric and Nardina, the CEO of Barstool. I would recommend that podcast to everyone because I think every episode is gold.
What's it called?
The Token CEO.
Eric and
on
Nardina
Apple Podcasts
incredible.
or wherever. Yeah.
Great Instagram follow as well. Like she drops some
Instagram
like
follow.
random videos. I highly recommend the follow. It's amazing.
Her take on Joe Rogan and Spotify's beef was incredible. Basically, like she was laughing at Spotify because they started out as an aggregator and now they're into content, and her line was, "You are in the mud now. Like, welcome to all the controversy and all the baggage that comes with having a high profile guest like Joe Rogan." The point that I was trying to get to was that like Gary Vee will be very upfront. He said in the podcast, like he has really made a career off of looking at which platforms offer the best organic reach, and then getting there early and really arbitraging attention. And like we've talked about TikTok months ago, where we're like, TikTok and LinkedIn are better than any platform out there in terms of getting your content and getting organic reach behind it. I think what we have struggled with is that we're like, oh, we're spending so much time. We're seeing like this community grow on Instagram. This is amazing. We almost don't want to go to LinkedIn or go to TikTok and be like, we have to start this again. But it's like you can understand that a platform gives you the best organic reach, gives you the most leverage, but it's a completely new thing. To do that, you are active on LinkedIn. This is where I'm heading. You are active on LinkedIn. I see some of your posts get 100, 250 likes. What have you learned from posting on LinkedIn? And like, is the organic reach crazy there, or is there something that we're missing there?
It's a weird platform because people are there with odd intentions. Like their intentions are so much more active than on any other platform. But it's also a platform where people post such frankly boring content that it's so easy to stand out. Yeah, it's so much like, but I don't know if you actually drive conversions on LinkedIn so much.
I think we worry about the same thing on Instagram. Like I just think the B2B audience is much more engaged on Twitter. And like if I had to think about it, I think 18K likes means so much more on Twitter or on YouTube than on Instagram, which is just kind of one of those existential things that like hangs out in my mind sometimes.
I would say get on Twitter for sure. I mean, I'm biased, but like I created one Twitter account about PowerPoint and as like a PowerPoint stan account, and it was such a unique niche idea that it only has like 218 followers or something right now, but it's reaching like about 1 million impressions a month. And part of that was because Ryan Reynolds tweeted about it once. But that moment aside, it's the engagement is quite strong on there. And I've actually, most of the people that are following that are people in the marketing industry. And so even though it's a smaller audience than I have elsewhere, it's a more impactful audience. Like it's people in the industry who are following that account, and they've translated to my main account. So Twitter and TikTok are the ones that I think you can still be discovered on. There's just not enough discoverability on Instagram. I think
Instagram's really handicapped by their algorithm, right? Your content is shown based on your network, and if you have 75 people, like it's a great post for us if it gets more than 200 to 300 views. But at the end of the day, like that organic reach drives so much traffic. I want to just finish on Twitter here. I was creeping your Twitter earlier and I saw that you follow Morning Brew. I think that Morning Brew is probably the best example that I can think of on Twitter, where we were talking in theory, we were having all these ideas about like really, if you look at a brand, a lot of the heavy lifting is being done by people nowadays and not by the logo, not by the content. And to me, like Morning Brew is just, it's head and shoulders above everyone in terms of their voice really comes from all the people that work at that company. So I was interested, like, are you networking with those people? What do you see that they're doing well? And maybe just share your experience of like how they engage and what they're doing really well on social.
Yeah, some of them follow me actually now, and I follow them. And so we've started to get to know each other a little bit, and it's all through just talking about stuff that we're mutually interested in. And I mean, to Will's earlier question about like, no, I don't have a data-driven case study to show how that impacts your outcome, but I think that there are case studies in the works. Like I say, I think that Morning Brew is going to be one of those marketing examples that gets studied for years to come. Having individuals champion your content is 100% the way to go, whether that's your founder, your entire team, or in the case of like Dairy Queen, which I wrote about recently, having just a staff member who's genuinely enthusiastic about their job is the most authentic way. Be a fan of your own stuff, basically, is what I would leave that off on.
Incredible, yeah.
Victoria, if you want to plug anything before we get going.
I'll plug, honestly, my Twitter account, Victoria M. Morton. And then there's Mother Decker Vic, which is just a good time on Twitter because it's jokes about PowerPoint and we all use them. So
thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're gonna have content like Sarah. You'll be on the Instagram account for weeks.
I'm so excited.
Thank you everyone for watching. Make sure to follow us at Render and Repeat Podcasts on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Catch all our new content. We're gonna listen to your strategy. Get on TikTok and LinkedIn and Twitter more, and hopefully that we can get an audience brew in here. All right, thank you. Bye everyone.